What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt back here for the latest episode of the Talk Is Cheap podcast. I'm here with Darryl Slater. First episode in a couple weeks. There's been a lot that's happened since we last met. The Giants are probably at their lowest point right now in a long time. Daniel Jones, we can get into him, but they're coming off a really bad loss against the Chargers, 37-21. A lot of their guys are on COVID protocol right now as COVID kind of sweeps through the league. I mean, where do you stand with this team right now as we head into the last 4 games of the season? I mean, we couldn't be any lower on them, I imagine.
Yeah.
We expected them to be bad, like us too, maybe more than other people, but I don't think we expected it to get as bad as it has. And obviously couldn't have predicted the Daniel Jones neck thing, but...
Right. I mean, 4-9, 4 games left. It's all about 2022 and what do they do at, who's their next GM going to be? What do they do at OC? Who's their next offensive coordinator going to be? It's probably, you wouldn't think it's going to be Freddie Kitchens. And then what's the decision that they're going to make on Daniel Jones? So they have the 3 big decisions to make going into the offseason. And, maybe this was a team when you looked at it, they were 4-7 after the Eagles win to close out November on Thanksgiving weekend. You thought, oh, all right, maybe they can build on this. They get the Dolphins. They could beat the Dolphins. Well, turns out Daniel Jones hurts his neck. And they stood
in that Eagles game, by the way.
In the Eagles game while running and not sliding. And so, they stood no chance against the Dolphins with Mike Glennon. I mean, they're not going to win any games with Mike Glennon playing. I mean, I think it's possible they lose out. I mean, maybe they beat the Bears, but... look, I mean, I don't know if they would have beat the Chargers anyway with Daniel Jones.
No.
It's a pretty darn good Chargers team.
But maybe they're at least more competitive for a little while, at least. Like, I don't know.
Right. So at this point, it's like it's hard to even read too much into anything that's happening, at least on the offensive side of the ball. At this point in another lost season, and so it's all about really the future. I mean, yeah, a lot of these guys are not going to play Sunday who are on the COVID list, but if you look at the 2 main guys who are on that list, Kadarius Toney and Adoree Jackson, like they probably wouldn't have played anyway,
because of injuries,
which is another issue.
Yeah.
The actual injuries that they have outside of COVID stuff, and Kadarius Toney's rookie year, a lost cause at this point. So, yeah, just a lot of bad.
Thanks. We can get into Jones in a second. I want to talk about him, but COVID-wise, we should. So there's like a COVID thing sweeping through the entire league, not just the Giants, but. So a couple guys that are on the list, you mentioned Kadarius Toney and Adoree Jackson, who, like you said, were injured anyway, but they probably would have had to miss now for COVID because I believe Adoree's unvaccinated. Other ones are Aaron Robinson, a rookie who's unvaccinated, so that would mean he'd be out, which is a big deal since they already don't have Adoree.
Yes.
And he's become like a starter. He's been pretty good. John Ross, O'Shane Ximenez. Blanking. There's somebody else. Cam Brown, who's an important special teams guy, and then Xavier McKinney's high risk close contact as a unvaccinated guy. Joe Judge was saying earlier today that he could play if he keeps testing negative through Saturday, which means he's isolated right now, and that's basically the last chance he would have to play before Sunday, and that would mean he hasn't practiced all week, but it doesn't really matter. They don't have any bodies back there anymore. So their secondary is kind of in shambles right now, and they're about to go against Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard. Like, Sunday could get ugly.
Very ugly. I think the line was like 10.5 in this game.
It's probably going up.
Yeah, I would think it's going up.
The Cowboys haven't even been hit by COVID at all, actually. I saw they've had 0 positives.
I think that 10.5 was probably based on the fact that, like, Jones isn't going to play, which has sort of been known. I don't know how much it'll go up beyond that, but the only question really is, will the Cowboys cover the line? I don't see any way the Giants win this game. Right now, it's still 10.5. So the only question is, will Dallas cover? And it seems likely that they're going to put up enough points to cover. And then, how are the Giants going to score?
So I wanted to get this. We can transition into Jones with this. So what the last couple of games, Mike Glennon, who's clearly a bad quarterback, had me thinking is that at the very least you have a baseline knowledge that Daniel Jones is more than a backup level player. Like he can at least he at least makes you competitive, and maybe he'd be better one day with a good supporting cast or something. But that's the thing, so that part I think is clear. Like, he's better than Mike Glennon. He's better than Colt McCoy, whatever. But these last 6-7 games, however many it was going to be, the only benefit of them, because this isn't a playoff team, was going to be to evaluate him.
Yep.
So now they have to base their evaluation on what they've seen. They have to decide by May if they want to exercise this $21 million option. I would think they wouldn't do that, but who knows? I mean, they're always raving about the guy. So
I think they will.
You think they will?
Yeah, because, look, I mean, if you don't do it, then you should just draft a quarterback and just quit on him and trade him.
Yeah.
Honestly. That's what you should do. Is if you're not going to exercise the option, then you've decided that he is... Now, I'm not saying what I think they should do.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm saying... So, if you've decided... If you're not going to exercise the option, you're saying he's not our guy. Because then you're letting him go into the last year of his contract and potentially losing him in free agency for nothing. You might as well just trade him, let the other team figure out if they want to pick up his option, which is exactly what the Jets did with Sam Darnold in this exact juncture.
And the Panthers exercise the option.
Yeah, in this exact point. Now, man, I don't see any team giving up what the Panthers gave up for Sam Darnold, which is, was insane. But I think they will pick it up because, look, it's $21 million, which sounds like a lot. So the cap next year in 2022 is going to be $208. Well, what is it going to be in 2020?
It should make a pretty huge jump, I would think.
2023. Yeah. Say it's like $225, right? So $21 million maybe sounds a little bit more palatable in that case, right?
Especially if he winds up having a good year next year, obviously.
And if he doesn't, then what do? Well, you're not going to straight up cut him. You could trade him for a late-round pick and then eat some of the salary. So you're not going to be eating the full 21 probably. So I think... just go ahead, bite the bullet, pick up the $21 million. Just because it's not like the Giants are in line for the number one pick in a year where there's the next Andrew Luck coming out. You know what I mean? So the quarterback draft class is a little weird this year. And, like, what are the odds they're going to get Russell Wilson or, something like that, right? Can they even fit him under the cap? Would he want to come here?
They would have to cut a bunch of guys or restructure, and then they don't have money to do anything else. I think
it makes no sense. Yeah. It also makes no sense for Russell Wilson to want to come here. Besides the fact that
whole rumor didn't make any
New
sense
York.
to me. Yeah.
Like, okay, so like Russell Wilson's agent put out a bunch of teams that he wanted to go to last year as like a way to squeeze the Seahawks into doing things that he wanted them to do. So remember that.
Yeah, because there was that rumor that Russell Wilson, like the Giants, were on the list of teams he would want to go to, but like you said, I just don't. So if you let's play that out. Let's say they cut all these guys, restructure a bunch of contracts. He still has that offensive line in front of him.
Exactly.
At best, they're getting a couple rookies in there. So.
And isn't one of the issues with him in Seattle
offensive line,
a lackluster offensive line? So like, it doesn't make sense on a lot of levels. But so obviously, the point that we started with remains. Daniel Jones entering this year, jury was still out. We're in mid-December here. The jury's still out. And if he doesn't play the rest of the year, which seems possible, they're going to go into the offseason with more unknowns about a guy who's 3 years into his career, and they got to pick up this binding option. And it's a horrible situation.
So they're going to have a new GM, obviously, at some point. I'm sure they'll announce a Dave Gettleman, in quotes, retirement, either at the end of the season or before it. But so, like, what is I know there's only 32 jobs, and that's the appealing part. But so if Joe Judge is coming back, which I think it's safe to say that he is probably, like, what's appealing about this job? They don't have any potential all pros that you can point to and be like, that guy's going to be an all pro one day. Yeah. They don't have a for sure thing at quarterback. You have to make that option decision within the first couple months you're on the job. You need to decide what to do with Saquon. You can't cut him. You have all these big money receivers and guys like that you can't really cut. Like, again, it's 32 jobs, so in theory you should be able to get somebody good. But if you're being told you have to use Joe Judge as your coach and all this other stuff, like,
you forgot the cap space.
And the cap situation is pretty bad,
You listed off all the cons. I was thinking them in my head as you were going, and the cap space is bad. You inherit a coach who has personnel say. What about, look, the main positive is that you have a lot of draft capital right off the bat.
Yeah.
And so if you're
that's the main thing. Yeah.
If they hire a GM who has a scouting background, particularly a college scouting background, it doesn't always work. Mike McCagnon had a college scouting background that didn't work for the Jets, and so then maybe that guy convinces himself, hey, I can turn this around. I can draft some good players there. But no, it's not an ideal situation. It's not a clean slate. It's not a pro. All the cons you've mentioned beyond the pro with the draft capital. So I think there's a couple reasons why John Mara has to cast a wide net, because he's probably gonna.
Because he didn't last time, you mean?
Well, he didn't last time, and they take such an insular approach with almost everything around here. Number two, and number three, like, the job, like we alluded to, for those reasons, is not going to be like an in-demand job. Like if you go and target 3 people, you're going to get all 3 of them to say yes. You know, like.
Well, I wonder what other. This is probably something we can write at some point. Actually, like what other teams are going to look at GMs, so you can stack them up with the Giants kind of thing.
So
I mean, Joe Douglas is not getting fired yet.
No, I'll go through the overall NFL standings and start from the bottom. I mean, if you look at the Lions,
the Texans just hired a GM, so they're not going to hire a new one.
Well, the one to look at, I think, could potentially be the Jaguars. I mean, Trent Baalke is like the GM there, but Urban Meyer was running the show. So what do they do there? Do they give Trent Baalke the GM job? I think as moving up the standings as they're looking at the overall standings.
The Bears are an obvious. I would think that's. I mean, they have Justin Fields. They don't have their first round pick, but you have the quarterback in theory.
I think Ryan Pace will probably almost certainly be a goner there with the Bears. The Raiders could be one because if they decide a full house cleaning,
Mayock,
and they want to bring in a full brand new situation there. The other ones, it doesn't.
A lot of these bad teams just hired GMs recently, so it's hard to like.
Now Minnesota is an interesting one because. I'm blanking on their GM's name. This is that's bad because he's
Rick Spielman, right?
Rick Spielman, yeah. He's a little bit
on
the older side, and
he's been since 2012.
Is he 60 years old or?
He's 59, yeah.
So one of the reasons George Payton left to go...
He's been the GM since 2012.
Yeah, and they haven't really been able to get over the hump. And George Payton, spelled Patton or Payton, went to the Broncos because he, maybe he thought like, Rick Spielman's going to be here for a little while. Maybe that's one to look at as like a potential surprise if Mike Zimmer, presuming he gets fired.
Yeah.
The other ones I don't. Kevin Colbert is probably potentially going to retire in say Big Ben goes. Maybe Kevin Colbert retires.
Pittsburgh probably has somebody in the building.
Probably Omar Khan would be the guy there.
They're a team that's like structured well in a way.
Right,
so
that would kind of fill itself. But it would Omar Khan would.
But a lot of these other teams like are either the bad teams recently hired a GM or like there's teams that have been just good enough to like keep who they have in place.
Right.
Just looking at the standings, I didn't realize the Bills were 7-6, by the way. But anyway,
yeah, the Bills have hit the skids a little bit, but like you said, I mean, they have a head coach and GM in place. But those are the ones to look at. But so it's not like it's going to be a lot of teams.
Yeah. So it's in reality they're one of the only teams that's going to be looking at a GM.
Yeah, and like they got to look outside, and I don't necessarily mean like you got to hire Louis Riddick. Like we get it, like that's a prominent name, and they interviewed him last time. But like go after guys like Mike.
Well, then, like you said, then they just need to cast a wide net. Don't just talk to 3 guys. Don't get your head set on one guy and not talk to a lot of people.
They talked to Gettleman last time. They talked to Louis Riddick. They interviewed Kevin Abrams and Mark Ross, and then Mark Ross winds up getting fired.
And 2 of them were in the organization. Gettleman is a Giants lifer before he got fired by the Panthers.
They interviewed 4 people, and
Riddick was the only one from outside the organization.
Yeah, 1 out of 4 on true outside candidates.
To only interview 4 anyway is like crazy.
It's absolutely insane.
And it's all people that are like your buddies.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, go ahead and
it's going to be something we're all going to ask Mayor about. Like, do you regret the way you went about it last time?
I mean, go interview 10 people. Request interviews with Mike Borgonzi from the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, the thing they should do is, go to the organizations that are run very well and hire somebody from there. The Ravens, the Chiefs, the Steelers, like organizations like that have like just been doing the right things.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple weeks ago, more than that, I put out the GM candidates, and it's not hard. It's not like gotta like, you look up guys who are hot candidates, and then look up why they're good. It's not like it's rocket science, but like I came up with just kind of off the top of my head like 21 different guys. Now, some of those guys are internal. I listed Kevin Abrams. I think a lot of fans would be really mad if they hired Kevin Abrams. The one guy you mentioned in the course of our conversation about this was the
Kyle O'Brien.
Yeah, Kyle O'Brien. I was blanking on his last name, and they had just brought him in from the Lions.
Yeah, he was under Bob Quinn for a long time.
So that would kind of be an internal candidate, but he's fairly new to the organization.
Although his dad was like a team doctor with the team for a very long time, so he kind of is like a.
Oh, and he definitely would be in
family,
promotion because he's working here. So I think that there's certainly guys that they could go outside and look at. Like, so even if you talk about like a Patriots connection, like Dave Ziegler is.
When I think of that's going to be one of the interesting things, how much they dictate, let Judge be like a part of the process, or how much they factor that in. Because I think John Mara is pot committed with Joe. I think he's going to be here a 3rd year. It might even be partially because he's tired of firing people after 2 years.
Yeah,
I think I get it. Like, give Joe a 3rd year to show that he's like building something different with a new GM or something, and maybe the new GM sees it as a chance. He has like a gimme year, and if they're bad, then he gets to fire Joe and hire his own coach.
Bingo.
Anyway. Like maybe that's a positive thing to look at. But I am very interested to see if they I don't have a problem with them necessarily hiring a Patriots guy, but don't hire it because of Joe Judge. Hire it if he's the best candidate.
100%. Yeah, I mean, you can't hire a candidate just because. Well,
peg to a coach who has won 10 games in 2 years. Yeah.
The crazy thing about we talked about Joe Douglas earlier. You mentioned him in passing. You know, the Jets basically let Adam Gase. Now, Joe Douglas might turn out okay.
That's a great point. Yeah.
He hasn't done a lot of great things so far. Joe Douglas.
Yeah, it's insane that they let Adam Gase.
He's made two really good trades: Jamal Adams trade and the Sam Darnold trade. But they did let Adam Gase pick Joe Douglas. Now, it's not like they had crossed paths a little bit. It wasn't like the entrenched relationship like Joe Judge would have with like a Dave Ziegler, who, for folks that don't know, Dave Ziegler is basically the GM.
Yeah,
entitled.
Like Belichick makes all the decisions, but yeah,
he's like the director of player personnel, and so he doesn't really have the full GM role, but he's Belichick's right hand man there after Nick Caserio left for Houston. So that would be one to watch. Let's see. He's been with the Patriots since 2013, so he's got 7 years of overlap with Judge. So they've worked together quite a bit. I mean, there's other guys, but like you said, hire the best guy. I mean, if that guy is going to be, I'm just going to like throw out a name. Like if it's free, you know, like Champ Kelly, a guy who's been named in a bunch of these searches
for a while. Yeah.
Maybe he has no relationship with Judge, but if he's the best guy, then go get him.
Yeah. I mean, the guy who comes in has his work cut out for him. He needs to decide if Daniel Jones is the quarterback. He needs to build an offensive line. He needs to get pass rushers. Like, those are the top three things. There's a lot of needs on this roster, but they're not going anywhere unless those three things are resolved.
And what do you do with Saquon Barkley? I mean, if this GM is not...
I mean, I would try to trade him, obviously.
I think at this point...
I don't know what you can get for him, but, I mean, maybe you can, if you're lucky, you can... Like, I can see a team getting tantalized by Saquon, so maybe you trick them into a third-round pick, maybe. Like, even that might be a little high.
That's always the
based on how he's played, but...
With a guy you want to trade, like, unless he's a disruptive jerk. Like, the rub is you want to trade him for a reason, and everyone knows the reason.
Everybody knows, Especially if Saquon had been coming off a good year, it's a little different, but he's been bad. So.
He's been bad, he's been hurt, and the position is undervalued, probably, rightly so.
Yeah, this isn't like when Trent Richardson got a first-round pick or whatever.
Right, I mean, I think that ship has sailed on being able to fleece a team on a running back in a trade. Maybe you can fleece a team on a quarterback like the Jets did with the Panthers in the Sam Darnold trade, but no, I don't see...
By the way, I just thought of this, because like Dave Gettleman famously said that Saquon was touched by the hand of God. And it was interesting. The other day, Eli Penny was asked after the game about Saquon, about how he keeps tripping and how it seems like he's struggling to get back to himself. And he's like, he's only human. He's not a robot. So it's kind of like the 4 years later, touched by the hand of God. Hey, he's only human. Yeah. He's not godlike.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the Saquon thing's gonna be very interesting because it's funny. Going into this year, the whole thing was about the contract, how much he would get, whether they should give it to him. Now it's like there's no way they should give him a contract, make him play out that year, and maybe he's good, or you trade him. There's just so many things that went wrong. Like Kenny Golladay is going to wind up with 500 receiving yards this year, or something like that, and they're paying him a lot of money. It's just a disaster. I mean, Dory Jackson's hurt and got COVID,
and had been good. Like the ones for signing. If you look at the PFF ratings, he had been quite good.
Even relative to the amount they paid him, though, the guy doesn't he stops guys, but he doesn't make plays. He doesn't have any interceptions.
They overpaid, as you have to do in free agency. And he had been good, but of course he gets hurt. Yeah, but guess what? He had been hurt.
Arguably the worst thing that they did was giving Kyle Rudolph $12 million for 2 years and keeping that contract even after the foot thing came up because they're a classy organization. That was irresponsible. This guy can't move. He's slower than you.
I mean, seeing him run in the open field on that Charger game.
That 60-yard play, I was blown away. That was the slowest 60-yard play I've ever seen.
I referred to it in my column of the game as fluky. I mean, he was lumbering down the field. And, look, I mean, it's no fault of his own. The guy coming off an injury, but the Giants, of course, the crazy thing we talked about a few times on here, and Dave Gettleman had this mantra, hurt guys stay hurt. Hey, that's a great point. That's a really good point.
It's a good quote.
But guess what he
didn't stick with it.
He signed Kenny Golladay, he signed Kyle Rudolph, he signed Dory Jackson, and even a guy like a Dory Jackson, like I said, who had been good, is now, shocker, hurt. So, geez, I mean, you almost can't make it up with the disconnect.
The first-round pick had an injury history. He's been hurt. Yeah, on top of everything else with Kadarius.
You can't make it up with the disconnect between the things that this guy said and the things that he did.
Yeah. Oh, there's and even the thing about restructuring contracts, they've had to do that throughout the year to save $200,000 at a time, which it sounds like a lot, but it's pinching pennies if you're an NFL team. And they had to deal with Nick Gates. They had to save $200,000 so they could be cap compliant while still being able to like sign guys to their practice squad.
I mean, it's like a guy, pawning off his TV to pay his mortgage. Like that's the point that they're at right now. I mean,
that's why so I wrote something about how they're going to be in cap hell, and I got some pushback. Like I think the majority of people understood my point I was making. Is they're in this spot because they've had to keep on restructuring deals, and it makes it harder to cut guys even when you need to cut them. So they're still going to be paying Nate Solder next year, even though he's not on the team.
Because he has a void year.
Because he has a void year. And so, like, the idea is, like, there's no such thing as cap hell in the NFL. Well, there is. They're in it right now. There's restructuring contracts in the middle of the season to save $200,000. That's a problem.
100% is.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. In 2023, the cap's going to go way up. But at that point, because this offseason, they're going to have to restructure, like, Leonard Williams, Kenny Golladay, James Bradbury. So those dudes' cap hits are going to be, like, $20 million each in 2023.
This team went ahead and made win-now moves this offseason in terms of the signings they made. And they banked on the quarterback taking the next step. They ignored the offensive line. I get that you can't address everything, but they put all their eggs in the skill position basket with the Kadarius Toney pick, with all the signings they made from Golladay to Rudolph, and I guess if you count corner as like a skill position on the other side of the ball. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's proven to be. And then they give Leonard Williams the massive extension of what appears to be a year that's an outlier, and now it's a sort of a regression to the mean this year from what he had done. You just can't recover from doing this time and again. And this is not the first time we've been down this road with this team. The Golden Tate contract, the Nate Solder contract. There's got to be.
I mean, they were so kind of ties into a lot of their mistakes. The Kevin Zeitler contract they had restructured, which is why it was worth $14 million this year, which is why they cut him. And he's been dominant there was like a stat that he's given up 0 sacks and like the least amount of 0 hits and 0 sacks the entire season for the Ravens.
So of course
and they cut him. They cut him so they can create cap space to add more weapons, and the offensive line is a fucking disaster. Sorry for cursing. But it is. It's that bad. But like it's just like the irony of they had to cut Kevin Zeitler, and the guy they traded for to get rid of him was the guy the Ravens were going to cut anyway, and then he's been too hurt to even play for them / not good enough.
Well, they needed to pay Leonard.
Ben Bredesen, by the way, is who I'm talking about. But
they needed to pay Leonard Williams, because they painted themselves into a corner with the trade and the franchise tag, and the franchise tag, of course, sets your bar for what you got to pay the guy. And instead of tagging, I guess they tagged him a second time, right?
Yeah.
And then so that sets the bar right. So for the contract of what he had to get, and he got this huge contract, and they get rid of Zeitler, and I think I guess I looked at it, I was wrong. I mean, I thought Zeitler was on the decline. He was okay last year.
Yeah, but he was like their only consistent, solid guy.
Yeah, and he's been very good this year.
Yeah. I get it. You don't want to pay him $14 million, and maybe you didn't want to restructure or whatever. But so, would you rather pay Kevin Zeitler $14 million now, or would you rather pay Kenny Golladay $18 million right now?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those cap hits next year out of 208. So I looked this up. The cap's 208 next year. And
I think like 60% of their salary is allotted to like 6 guys or something.
Yeah, Leonard Williams' cap number is like 27 next year. He's occupying 13%.
I think Kenny Galladay's 20-something.
21. They've got like 3 guys who are in the 20s. James Bradbury.
Then they've got a few who are like in the 15 to like 19 range.
Yeah, I mean, to have a guy like Leonard Williams, considering his production, taking up 13% of your cap, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have... look, it's a 53-man roster, so you got one guy taking up 13% of it at a $27 million hit on a 208 cap, and that guy is giving you 5.5 sacks.
Yeah.
5.5 sacks.
And Leonard's hurt for the first time in his career right now, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, they could have had Micah Parsons, who has been 20 times the player that Leonard Williams has.
That's actually a good transition, because we can wrap up here by saying how much we think they're going to get killed on Sunday. But you've written about this, and it's been written about by a lot of people. But so they traded back, and everybody celebrated that Trader Dave finally became a thing. He traded back, got an extra first-round pick. Hoorah. They get Kadarius Toney, who's barely played. If they had stayed at 11, they could have picked Rashawn Slater, who it doesn't seem like they ever were going to pick, which was a mistake because they trusted in Matt Peart. Slater looks like an all-pro. He's with the Chargers, who they just played. And then this week they get Micah Parsons, who I think has like 11.5 sacks, and people are talking about as a defensive player of the year. Could have had him at 11. But instead they traded back, and they got Toney, who's barely played when he's been immature. Like, he had he's talented. And so they basically need a hit on that first-round pick next year, or it just looks like another disaster. And it's
person-
funny because they finally trade back, but
That
Parsons
guy needs
is
to be a
stud.
star. I mean, and they did trade back like 8 spots in the second round, and I wrote this, and they get Azeez Ojulari,
Yeah.
did a rookie report card and said, okay, they get an extra third-round pick from the Dolphins for that, and okay, maybe they get a good player in the third round. So that looks like an okay enough trade back, but at this point, it's hard to look at that first-round trade back as anything more than a failure. I mean, you can't really evaluate Kadarius Toney off just 1 year, even if he had played the full year. But the returns are not great. Now, injuries are part of that, but injuries are always part of the assessment in the NFL. So the returns aren't great, and they're certainly not great compared to Micah Parsons and Rashawn Slater, who were, by the way, who play positions of need for the Giants.
Yeah,
they
which
would
is
have
the
been.
worst.
It's not like Micah Parsons was just a Mike linebacker.
Yeah,
clearly.
yeah. Well, I think I wonder. I don't know if the Giants were one of them. I think they probably weren't considering him because he had like some off-field questions, I guess. But anyone who thought he was just an off-ball linebacker were way off, obviously, because that dude's a freak.
Really good player, and they could have used him. And like you said, if they don't get a.
It's always tougher when a division team gets a guy like that you could have had too.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't get, and we all thought all along that like the Devonta Smith thing was going to be the one that comes and bites the Giants back because the Eagles, whatever,
Swoop them, yeah,
they get, but it's actually been Parsons and Slater who have been two of the best overall players at the position in the entire
Pro Bowl
league.
caliber guys as rookies.
Yeah, and not just good for rookies, good overall, and yeah, I mean, and it's. When it rains, it pours. I guess for this team, and it's poured a lot lately. And if they don't get a good player, I mean, say they're picking 5 and 6 next year. I mean, you have to get 2 awesome players there. Period. Period.
I mean, I wouldn't put it against them if they drafted 2 offensive linemen there, honestly.
And that may be the right move. I mean, because
and sad part is the fact that they have to do that because they failed so miserably to build the offensive line is the problem. Whereas you would rather just like pick for value, they almost like. They need to either reach or they need to pick an offensive lineman and a pass rusher no matter what.
They got to reach for like a guard because they need 2 guards and a right tackle. That's what the situation is.
Yep.
I mean, they don't. Who knows what Nick Gates is going to be coming back off a horrific injury?
If he can even come back off it,
right?
Yeah.
And then Andrew Thomas has shown you some things, I guess, that you can build around. He's played through an injury lately, so that's maybe. But he's obviously not going anywhere. He'll be the left tackle. So you need a right tackle and you need 2 guards. Jeez, I mean, what a mess.
Anyway, on that note, what's your prediction for Sunday? And we'll go out on that note.
Yeah,
I think I had at 30-10. I just, I mean, they got blown out by them last time. That was when, all those guys went down during the game. Jones, Saquon, Galladay. They know going in that Jones isn't playing, which doesn't make it better or worse. It's just bad. So, and the Cowboys are a good team trying to get, home field advantage in the playoffs or whatever. So, it could get ugly on Sunday. Yeah,
motivated Cowboys team, banged up Giants secondary. Oh, by the way, Mike Glennon at quarterback. I picked Cowboys 30, Giants 13. I don't even know if they can score 13 points, given what they've shown the last couple weeks against Miami and the Chargers in terms of their offensive capabilities. Minimal, of course. But, yeah, it's going to be a bloodbath. I don't think there's any way they keep it within the 10.5 line. We were talking about that earlier. So if you're betting it, don't blame us if you're wrong. But I would say you could bet the Cowboys to cover the 10.5.
All right, we'll wrap it up on that note. Thanks again for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.